I'm talking about continuously architected with Terraform, and it's it's going to be a very interesting topic for us. So let's go. Before we get in, let me just talk about myself a little bit. My name is Ewere Diagboya. I'm head of infrastructure at Indicina. Indicina is a fintech company in Lagos, Nigeria, where we do a lot of work around creditor system, where we help companies to decide who to give credit to. I'm also the author of Amazon CloudWatch book, which I'll be showing very soon. I'm also the first AWS community hero in Africa. I blog at Medium a lot. I write a lot of stuff on Medium about DevOps, about cloud computing. I also love music, art, and reading. I forgot to add that I'm a potential photographer at the moment, so it's something I picked up recently, and that's me. So let's go into the meat of the day. So this is my book on CloudWatch. You can get it. It's published by Packet. It's already at Amazon, and yeah, it just gives you information about CloudWatch, what you can use CloudWatch to do, the basics of monitoring, observability, and all you need to know about monitoring from the ground up. If you're a learner, you can actually get this and get it up and running. Okay, what does it mean to be well architected? I think that's the most basic question to start with. What does it mean to be well architected? Before now, I don't think this statement was much of a big deal. We used to deploy cloud resources based on a lot of assumptions, okay? We just get into the cloud, set up what we need to set up, and get things done. And what happened over time was many organizations fell into a lot of issues, such as security issues, such as scalability issues, such as reliability issues of their systems. And companies and businesses built a way of a structure, a standard within the organization of how to run these systems, okay? But hey, the well-architected system is supposed to be like a standard, okay, that we can all work with. A standard that helps to make everything work out perfectly fine in terms of architecture. So let's talk more about what does it mean to be well-architected. So the WellArchitected Framework is a set of building architectural principles to aid the setup of resilient, secure, and cost-effective cloud infrastructure. That's basically what the WellArchitected Framework is about. So it's supposed to help us to build better architecture. Like I said, before the well-architected framework, companies and organizations used to build their infrastructure any way they like and just get things done and get moving. But those activities have their consequences. Okay, so the well-architected framework is supposed to help in guiding principles, okay, so that we can set up and deploy resilient, secure, and cost-effective cloud infrastructure. So apart from just setting up the infrastructure, the cost of the infrastructure is also important. We have to know that there are better ways of setting up our infrastructure. There are better ways of architecting the systems so that they are more affordable. The next is, there are 5 pillars, and they were actually made this in reInvent 2021. I mean, actually not 2022. That was reInvent last year. Okay, so these are the pillars that make up the well-architected framework. We have the security pillar, we have the operational excellence, we have the performance efficiency, we have the reliability pillar, we have the cost optimization pillar, and the sustainability pillar. Now, these pillars are just the way they are mentioned. They are like title headings for the 6 areas where you can focus on when you are setting up and deploying your cloud infrastructure. So what these pillars are trying to say is that you need to find a way on how you can follow the structures of each of these patterns to ensure that you are able to deploy your infrastructure adequately. Now, each pillar has a set of rules for implementation. So if you go into the security pillar, there are certain rules that they give you to be able to deploy your workload properly. If you go to the operational excellence pillar, there are certain rules you are given to ensure that you deploy appropriately. Same with every other pillar in the well-architected framework. Now, the question now is, we talked about AWS well-architected framework, we talked about the pillars, and how these pillars are supposed to be guiding principles. But how does Terraform come into play? That's the question. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, we just talked about AWS and well-architected framework, and this presentation is talking about being continuously well-architected with Terraform. So where does Terraform come into play? So the simple answer is this. using Terraform alone already fulfills the major part of the operational excellence pillar. Okay, now what's one major part of the operational excellence pillar? It's a way of ensuring that you are able to use things like what we call infrastructure as code. Infrastructure as code helps you to define infrastructure more in a programmatic way than just going to the console to click and get things done. A very basic example: you want to set up an EC2 instance. Most times you need to think about the instance size in AWS, the size of the EBS volume, what VPC you want to configure that instance into, and so on and so forth. 90% of the time, if you're new to the cloud, you just go to the console and you go to EC2, launch an instance, click next, and boom, and you're done. Now, the problem with that is you will not be able to repeat that process exactly the way you did in the same way every time. And that's where infrastructure as code comes in. And apart from that, you also cannot transfer that information or that knowledge over to every member of your team, because most times you're working in a team, not just a single person. So it's good that you have a more defined method of how these things work. It's just like writing a story on a book. I mean, you can easily pick up a book today. You can pick up Rich Dad Poor Dad and learn the stories that Robert Kiyosaki wrote there. So what infrastructure as code is saying is we need to be able to document. We need to be able to write out how we want these things to work. It's just putting it in an English form, okay? Putting it in an English form so that everyone can put it in a written form, so that everyone else can actually use that particular thing. And that's where the operational excellence pillar talks about. It talks a lot about making sure infrastructure is repeatable, making sure the infrastructure is transferable, okay? And that's how Terraform already solves a part of that pillar for you. So we see how using Terraform alone already solves a very basic problem in terms of well-architected framework. So if you're an organization, you're using Terraform, you are a step ahead in terms of being well-architected. But if you don't use any form of infrastructure as code, and for example, Terraform, then you might have to think about that again so that you can use something that will help to scale your organization. Okay, then introduce Checkoff. We've talked about AWS, we've talked about well-architected framework, we've talked about Terraform, infrastructure as code, that makes it possible for you to write your infrastructure how you want it to look like, okay? So you have a written form of your infrastructure where you can actually share this written form to thousands and millions of people all over the world, and you get the same output at the end of the day. But we're talking about trying to be well-architected, and don't forget that the well-architected framework has about 6 pillars, okay? About 6 pillars. So it means that we are trying to make sure that we are as well-architected as we can in every resource we create for something as basic as an S3 bucket, which is what I'm obviously going to show us in our demo, okay? Something as basic as an S3 bucket, there is actually a proper way to configure an S3 bucket in AWS. You can just say, oh, it's just an S3 bucket. It's just to click on create bucket, type in the bucket, and boom, you're done. Trust me, that bucket is not well architected. There are so many other things that should go with that bucket when you are creating that bucket. It's just easy to go to the console and click next, boom, 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 bam, finish, and you're done, and you move out, okay? So what you need to do is we need to find a way to make sure our S3 buckets are well architected. They follow the guiding principles of the well-architected framework, and that's where Checkoff comes in. Now, what is Checkoff? Now, Checkoff is a tool that checks to ensure that infrastructure as code is defined to be standard, okay, to certain standards. Now, Checkoff has hundreds of set of rules it uses to check the infrastructure as code for standards, and these rules can be customized to meet specific business needs. So Checkoff on its own is a tool for standardization. It helps to check your infrastructure as code to ensure that you are writing it according to certain standards. And one of the standards that it follows, it has hundreds of rules, okay? Checkoff is actually by Bridge Crew, okay? They have a paid version, they have a free version. So when you use Checkoff, it's able to check your code, okay? And tell you, you know what, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this for your infrastructure to be better configured and better designed. And that's exactly what the well-architected framework is talking about. The well-architected framework is talking about ensuring you design a resilient, scalable, and cost-effective infrastructure in the cloud. And I mean, what best way to check it by using Checkoff to make sure that you always continue to check your infrastructure code to make sure that it meets those standards. And the beautiful thing about Checkoff is that it's CLI based, so it can easily be integrated to any CI tool, okay? From GitHub Actions to GitLab CI to Jenkins to Bitbucket CI to whatever CI tool you use, okay? I just mentioned a few of them here, but since it's a CLI command, you can basically integrate it to any CLI, a CI tool, CI/CD tool to perform that continuous check. So whenever you check in code and you create a pull request, you can just create a trigger and Checkoff to be able to check and make sure that that code that you are checking into trunk actually meets the standard of the well-architected framework based on what Checkoff validates in that particular script. Okay, a little bit of demo time here. So let's look at a very simple code that I wrote, and let's see how we use Checkoff to check it and see what Checkoff flagged in that code to show that we whether we are well architected or not. Okay, so here we are with this Git repository, which has a very basic Terraform code. So I'll just quickly go to the Terraform code and explain what I did with Checkoff. So basically, this is simple Terraform code that helps to create an S3 bucket. So I just went to the Terraform website, okay, the documentation, and picked a very simple S3 bucket creation. Okay, this is as basic as you can get an S3 bucket. I mean, if you want to create an S3 bucket, this is all you need, with all the right credentials and access key and secret key, whatever a method you want to use to authenticate and authorize your Terraform code, and it creates a bucket. But unfortunately, this bucket is not well architected. Okay, it's not following those 6 guiding principles of how you should deploy any resource in AWS cloud. So what else do we have here? We have the provider file, basically, which shows us the AWS region, the Terraform version, and all that. And then we've integrated GitHub Actions here, which is the whole subject of the conversation, which is about making us continuously well architected. So what the GitHub workflow does, basically, is that it continues to check to make sure that what we have is well architected. Okay, so let us see the action that we ran to see what it actually brought out, if we are actually well architected or not. Let's see if what I'm saying is actually right or wrong. So if we come to actions, we can see the workflow, and we can see they are all showing red. Okay, so let's open one up and let's see what the logs are saying. Okay, so there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. Let's just go down quickly and get to the meat of the matter. Okay, so these are all debug information coming from the Checkoff library. And when we get to the bottom of all this, you're going to see something very interesting. Okay, you're going to see that Checkoff has different rules for checking your infrastructure. So I'll just digress a little bit here and you see Checkoff is running a check to ensure S3 bucket policy does not lock out all root users. So Checkoff is starting to run a check on my code. Okay, it's running a check on the main.tf file, which I have given it as a directory where I have my file. So it's running a check and see if anything passes or fails. And part of the default rules it also has are rules for other environments. For example, you can see it has some rules for Azure right here. Okay, but what we have is AWS, so it's going to do more for AWS. You can see it has some rules for Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. So Checkoff is actually it works for any kind of Terraform code, whatever you're deploying the Terraform code into. And when Checkoff was done, it came up with some very interesting results. 5 checks passed and 6 checks failed. So let's quickly look at this checks that failed. The first check that failed is a code they have. So this is like a Checkoff internal code for tagging every compliance error or any of that sort within their environment. So it says, ensure S3 bucket policy does not lock out all but root user. Okay, so it's trying to tell us here that we need to make sure that the S3 bucket does not lock out everyone. There's a way you can configure an S3 bucket policy that no one else can use that bucket. So Checkoff is trying to check your Terraform code to ensure that the configuration does not work in that way that it blocks everyone out. The next is trying to flag here is saying ensure S3 bucket does not allow an action with any principal. So this is a security check that Checkoff has done for us, which is part of the security you will find when you check WellArchitected on S3. Because the truth is, WellArchitected Framework applies to every single service within AWS. Okay, there is a holistic standard, but there are also specific standards for every single service. If you pick up an AWS service and you pick the 6 pillars, there are specific activities that you need to make sure that that particular service is well architected. Okay, so one of them here is saying that ensure that the bucket does not allow an action with any principal. Okay, if you look at if you use S3 a lot and you look at the policies for S3, what it's trying to say here is the principal should be a specific principal and not just any principal from your bucket policy configuration, which is very, very awesome. It means that you're making sure that that bucket is not accessible by everyone to perform any action they like. Okay, which is one of the rules of security we call least privilege. Okay, it's part of the well-architected framework and the security pillar. The next we have here is ensure no hard-coded AWS access and secret keys exist in the provider. This is also part of the security pillar also. So you see, automatically, the fact that we're already using Terraform, we have fulfilled the performance, the operational excellence pillar. And now Checkoff is also helping us to become better well-architected by telling us security principles we should follow in terms of how we should secure our bucket. And now it's talking about AWS access key and secret key credentials that shouldn't be. Okay. And then the next thing is ensure that the bucket policy allows only read and not write access. Okay. The next thing we have here is ensure that S3 has cross-region replication. So, I mean, initially it looked so much like it was all about security, but here, this is not about security. This is about reliability. Don't forget, when we talked about the 6 pillars, we talked about reliability, performance efficiency, operational excellence, cost, security, and sustainability. So it's telling you that you need to ensure that what you enable cross-region replication. What does cross-region replication mean? It means that your bucket is able to replicate itself across different regions for higher availability. So if anything happens to your data, you are sure that your data is automatically available in another region within AWS infrastructure. So you see how Checkoff works with Terraform to ensure that your AWS infrastructure is well architected. Now, what is so beautiful about using a CI tool or GitHub Actions in this scenario is if someone else decides to contribute to this code, creates a pull request and pushes the code, what is going to automatically happen is that it is going to check again, immediately the push is done. It's going to automatically check and say, is this code still well architected? Because it's a GitHub action that is triggered on push, it will run through that script. And if it fails based on the standards, it's going to show you an error that you are not well architected. And then you have to go back to your Terraform code, make the changes, make the suggestions, update it accordingly, and ensure that you are well architected. The next thing we have here is that ensure that the S3 bucket has access logging enabled. Now, we talked about operational excellence. Now, this is under performance efficiency. Performance efficiency has to do with how you manage your operations within your organizations. And one of the things that goes with managing your operations and your systems and understanding how they work is by logging activities. So what this is trying to say is we need to enable logging so that we can see everything that's going on within the bucket, data going in, data going out of the bucket, data being deleted from the bucket, how data is being accessed in the bucket. This logs makes it easier and better for us to operate more efficiently, understand what is going on with the bucket, and fine-tune the bucket to be more efficient. Let me give a very basic example. If we understand the access patterns of our bucket, we could actually change the storage class of the bucket to moving it from maybe a standard to what an intelligent terrain or even a glacier, because we have used the logs to understand the behavior of the access and the activities on the bucket, and that has informed our decisions to update and change the storage class of the bucket. So we see that already we're already meeting almost 4 pillars from the well-architected framework. I've talked about security, I've talked about performance efficiency, we've talked about operational excellence, we've talked about reliability. So that's already 4 pillars covered. And then if you go down again, you're going to see other things. I think we just have 2 more here. We have S3 bucket needs to have versioning enabled, which is also part of reliability. Reliability in the sense that when you enable versioning on the bucket and you have multiple versions of the file, when you delete one, the older version still exists, which acts as a fail-safe when data is deleted by mistake or by error. Okay, and then you can see also one that says here that ensure all data stored in bucket is securely encrypted at rest. Back to security. So from all this information that has been processed and this is being shared with us by Checkoff, after Checkoff has run a test on our Terraform code, we can actually summarize and say that yes, Checkoff and Terraform working together with the CI tool helps to ensure that we remain well architected in the AWS environment, because Checkoff is able to look at our Terraform code and say, hey, the way you wrote this Terraform code is not up to proper standard. You need to look at this, you need to check this, you need to check that. And please, Checkoff, this is just the basic Checkoff. Checkoff has more tools, and you can actually configure custom rules. So if you're an organization where there are rules around how people should access cloud resources, who should have access to what, which are not covered in the Checkoff dictionary, because this is more like a Checkoff dictionary of the basic standards, you can actually customize it using YAML or Python and integrate it within the Checkoff CI. So this is basically how you can remain continuously well architected using Checkoff and Terraform. Thank you very much.